Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Six Plus Plus's The Kids Table. This is where we talk everything competitive and less so, if you're me, in 40k. This week, we're going to talk about playstyles, different army builds, how they play, how they function, all sorts. Talk about how they match up in the meta and how armies have changed over time. I'm joined this week by Joe. How are you doing, Joe?
Yeah, good, thank you. Got a nice refreshing beverage here, so could be worse.
And I saw you at an event recently. We were both at Scrivo's narrative event, so again, not the most competitive. What are you working on after that? It was quite an interesting one for you.
Blood Angels, 100%. New codex has dropped, actually dropped as well now, so I can play it at competitive events, and I think it looks great. It's really, really fun. It's really, really fluffy. Obviously, it's lost a bit of power. You can no longer put 10 Power Fists on your Death Company with 10 Inferno Pistols, but to be honest, I think that's probably for the best.
Yeah,
And
I'm
it,
glad it's gone. So glad.
And no more fights on death as well, so maybe people will enjoy playing Blood Angels.
Yeah, who
Nice.
knows?
I mean, I
I
intend to
do.
make sure they don't, but maybe other people will.
Yeah, the flexing and the shadow boxing and the general ripping your shirt off and being uncouth probably gets
Yeah,
to them a bit.
the constant screaming might get a bit unnerving.
And I'm also joined by Connor. Connor, how are you? How's 40k going for you?
I'm very good, thank you, Jack. Yeah, I've just been to a team tournament past weekend with Harley, who's not here today, unfortunately. A couple of other guys from the team, and we had a blast. Came second. Really enjoyed it. Probably never play on the list I played ever again, but you know, all is good.
Sometimes you need
What were
those
you
kinds of
taking?
events, though.
I played Black Templars Gladius, and
Okay,
it was good. I did get 20-0'd by Votan, but we won't
uh,
talk about that. The less said,
how
the
many
better.
Crusaders?
None. No Crusaders.
None.
That
Oh,
sounds like less than the optimal amount.
Well, not anymore. You see, because that
Okay.
list went up about 250, 300 points. So
yeah, that list
won't
is
be taking that anymore.
in the bin.
In
In the
in the
bin.
bin, fully in the bin.
Um, okay, well, so I guess on topic of that list, that was Black Templars, 100 Crusader bodies. A very
Yeah.
melee list. And when we talk about playstyles, there's obviously a lot of different things that go into it. It's not just one archetype. It's not just guns versus combat. There's a lot more to it than that. But if we start off there, um, engagement types. So probably one of the biggest divides in armies is: do they shoot? Do they fight? Do they do both?
And as we all
See,
know, fighting is objectively the best.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
100%.
I'm very much a combat army enjoyer. I think almost every army I've played, except for like a couple gunline castles with Abaddon recently. Besides that, it's always been melee focused. Um, but there is benefits to guns. Um, you know, punching only goes so far, especially if you're playing Death Guard. You only move 5 inches. It's difficult to get there.
Sometimes 5 inches is all you need, though.
Plenty. I would say plenty.
More than enough, actually.
Um, but then, so do you have any, apart from see range benefits, what do you guys think about shooting versus combat versus a mix? How do you build your armies?
Well, I like to. I'm a melee man at heart, but I do like to put in a bit of shooting. So I'd probably fall more into the mixed category when it comes to actually trying to design a competitive list. Um, like you say, melee only goes so far, and I think adding that element of shooting can keep your opponents honest. It can stop them going, well, he doesn't have any shooting, I can just stand wherever I want. If you add one or two credible shooting threats to your army, you can really help to control the flow of the battle, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, almost every list we've seen, besides super leaning one direction, always have a couple guns, quite Blood Angels in the old codex with their jump packs. Probably often had 2 Lancers in the backfield just to dish out that strength 14 with rerolls. If tanks are sat really far away behind walls, it's hard to get to them, and that keeps them out of the way if you needed them to.
I think the thing about Lancers is they are disproportionately good for melee armies because being historically a Custodes main, now moving on to Blood Angels, there's one thing that I've always struggled to deal with, and that's transports. What a Gladiator Lancer gives you is the option to pop a transport before you charge it, so you can get the juicy, squishy stuff on the inside, rather than fighting the transport and then going, oh no, when 10 Plague Marines get out and throw 2 grenades at you. Not anymore, albeit, when they throw 2 grenades at you and then charge you and kill you immediately.
Which they will do. Because
Yes.
Plague Marines, best unit in the game, maybe.
Debatable.
Yeah,
Definitely up there, though.
I ran to a Gladiator Lancer at the weekend, and it's definitely. I was in the camp, then I was out of the camp, but now I'm back in the camp because they're actually quite good, and I think I'd be running 2 in most Marine lists now.
Yeah, so I ran one at this narrative event we went to. I say narrative. There were some very tuned lists there.
Not mine, but yeah.
Yeah, no, not yours. Yours was terrible. And the lance was so helpful because it just gives you that little bit of long range punch that power fists can't give you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't have to succeed on a charge roll with a lancer.
Yeah.
No, it's dice, but the Lancer again negates that when you have, because it has built-in rerolls. So that's how the armies engage one another. It's pretty simple. But when it comes to what you prefer, often there's a lot that goes into the play style. So for me, I think I tend to play quite a cagey game. I play quite reactive Warhammer, and I like small, crappy units. So I would say I like to sit in my corner, and then as objectives are drawn, I will send units out to do those. And if an opponent puts something into the middle, I'll wait until they commit before I counter them. Which obviously means I keep my resources safe. I can build them all up. I can react to them. But often, if someone was to run their entire army at me, I'm not in the best position because I've tried to keep everything back, keep everything safe. World Eaters with their no fallback, if they were to kill a unit of cultists and tag my tanks, I'm in a real spot of bother there. Especially if it's a Forge Fiend that really can't shoot in combat. It's a bit rough.
What do you mean Forge Fiend can't shoot in combat? You take the autocannons, obviously.
So because I'm good at Warhammer, I take the plasma.
I see.
Because the autocannons don't one-shot a 10-man squad of Grey Knight Terminators.
That's a skill issue on your part.
Well, on my opponents and their dice. But what about you guys? What are some playstyle types that you enjoy, you sort of think about a lot, you gravitate towards?
I have been lenient to a stat check. So I've run Canoptic Court Necrons in the past when they came out, and they were quite good. I did take it to Nottingham and small RTT.
Yeah, so Connor's actually the least favourite person to play against in this group.
Yeah. The thing is, I never do like well with it. It's usually other things that I play. But I've played Crusader Templord recently. I was running 60 in a unit of Terminators, so not quite the full 100. I took it to an RTT, it went well. Took it to LGT, didn't go well. And the less said, the better. And that list went up about, I think, 200 points.
Ooh.
So, yeah,
that's quite a Horde list like both. Well, the Crusader, but let's talk about that one for a minute.
Yeah.
That's quite a proactive list because it's not particularly fast. It has to make the first move, right? It's a list where it wants to establish a board presence, get up the field, and then keep going, basically.
Yeah, you want to run your opponent over is the term I'd use. But yeah, you're running to the objectives turn 1, turn 2, then
Yeah.
you're pushing your opponent back while you're scoring your points. And
It's one of those
Okay.
lists where if you make the mistake of drip feeding it, I think you'll have a really bad time.
yeah, if
Yes.
it's push out a couple of units, stuff's behind it doing stuff, and then they deal with that. Then you chuck the final wave, and you're hoping that you scored enough points that by the end of the game you might be tabled, but you've won on primary and you've scored well on secondaries.
Okay, so definitely a proactive list, an army that wants to get the first foot in the game. Would you
Yeah.
say it's aggressive or more sort of like it's definitely not a sit back? Would you say it's
No,
aggressive
you
or
can't sit back with that. There's not enough places to hide and stage. You can stage units in certain positions, but generally you're pushing out. You're going these points are going to be mine. You can't stop me, and just see how it goes.
okay?
I think I am very much with you on this one, Jack. I like to sort of sit back, be a bit more reserved, let my opponents make the first move and potentially make mistakes. Obviously, historically, having played Custodes, I love going second and I love using rapid ingress, because there are a few things scarier than 6 custodian bodies just appearing behind all of your stuff and going, "I'm going to kill you now."
So obviously that's definitely a reactive playstyle. I would say probably the use of rapid ingress is quite an aggressive move. Or well, maybe it's a passive
Yeah,
army, but the use of rapid ingress is very proactive. It's not reacting to a threat; it's shoving 6 custodian bodies
It's
down your opponent.
becoming the threat. That's
Yeah, it's flipping the game. Sort of once it
yeah,
gets to the mid, turn 3, you're like, I'm going to cause problems now. You've had your fun. It's my turn.
yes. Custodians are very
Um,
much one of those armies where you can't afford to overstretch yourself because you'll quite quickly find that custodians aren't really as durable as they need to be able to just like sit in the middle of the table. So you have to make your opponent come out, expose themselves, come within your threat range, and then you just turn it on, turn it all the way up to 11, put your foot on the gas, and just absolutely floor them.
okay, yeah. So I guess some of the what do you think are some of the issues with how like a reactive army like Custodes, I guess, in this plays? How you when you're playing KG? Because obviously I know I have tons of issues when I play CSM without a Curse Cultist, RIP, and it's quite easy to get hemmed in all of a sudden if an opponent's got scout moves and they've gone first. All of a sudden, those spots are you're looking at rapid ingress are filled by 2
Yeah,
or 3 waves of 60-point bodies.
custodians
Throw
can
away.
struggle to um, they can struggle to control the pace of the game, particularly when they're playing against an army that outnumbers them. Like first armies that have more units than custodians are an absolute nightmare to try and deal with because they just move up the board. They take all the good staging points before you, and you go, well, if I move up now, I'm either going to get charged or I'm going to be wide out in the open. I'm just going to get shot to death. And
So I
there
guess in
aren't
that
many armies
instance,
that custodians are first to them, which is the disappointing thing.
so I was 6-inch move with advance and charge access isn't slow. Good rapid ingress options, but yeah, they're not a fast army. But so I guess in that instance, that's potentially where you'd have to adapt your playstyle. You can't always just sit back as
That is
custodies and
where
wait.
the Calades grav tanks come in really helpful. I know it's been done to death. Everyone knows how good they are, but they are amazing. Probably one of the best anti-tank platforms in the game, I'd say. They're incredibly consistent and they have a lot of damage output. There aren't many people who want to be stood in front of a Caladius with no cover.
No, I would well, unless I'm playing Pact Bound and I can turn off your shooting with a Forge Fiend, then
Well,
no.
yes.
That's cheating, though. Basically,
Everyone knows Chaos Space Marines cheat.
yeah.
So that basically
Even though
doesn't
it's
even
in the
count.
rules.
Yeah, it might be in the rules, but it's still cheating.
So, if I were to say passive versus aggressive, what sort of armies do you guys think about? Let's go start with aggressive. You know,
World Eaters.
Yeah.
World Eaters, 100% just want to get in your face as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And they can as well. It's not an army that they don't just want to. They
It
absolutely
they can and will.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do, but they are a bit one-dimensional in that regard.
Yeah.
If you because at the start of the game, you know what. Well, at the start of each round, you know what they're going to be able to achieve. You know whether they've got like advancement charge, plus 2-inch move. So if you go first against them, it's very easy to control the flow of the game against World Eaters.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Drukhari tend to be quite aggressive, but
Yeah,
in a trading sort of way, I'd say.
Yeah, it's not shove everything and see. I think one army that I would say that's probably, well, as we're discovering, is specifically the melee build of Gene Stealer cults. Gene Stealer cults, best guys. Their resurrection, obviously, battle rounds 1 and 2 is a 4-up. You want to get as much stuff dying turns 1 and 2 to get the best chance of rezzing it.
Yeah, you don't want any of your stuff to die turn 3. That's cringe.
You need to be committing all of your bricks turns 1 and 2. If you want to get going first helps as well, as you can stage and commit. You can also start 700 points of your army in no man's land if you really want to. Not that I would suggest that. The army's not quite that aggressive. Because every army is a bit of a mix of playstyles, but GSC is a very proactive army. You start off very proactive, and as units respawn, you can alter the playstyle, step off the gas, and react. But the army definitely wants to be aggressive as it goes, which is quite an interesting change. It's very unique in that sense, I would say, because it's kind of the only army that respawns as much as it does.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think New Blood Angels, particularly when they're played in Liberator Assault Group, very aggressive.
Is that the uppy downy one?
No, so that's the Liberator Assault Group is +2 strength and +1 attacks when you charge.
Oh, so the
not Sons of Sanguinius. It's
but,
Liberator Assault Group.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's a detachment that is all about. I mean, you get boosted melee. You want to be charging people and doing as much damage as possible. If you aren't doing that, something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is it the angelic host?
The angelic host is the uppy downy.
Right. Because
and that
I've
is-
been hearing things about 18 Inceptors. And
Yeah.
and that could be quite aggressive.
Yeah, that could be. But overall, that detachment's more about mobility and scoring, I'd say.
Yeah.
Which is generally quite almost passive and reactive. If you're so fast and able to grab corners, like you don't see Grey Knights fronting up to the midboard. Well, I mean, sometimes you do if they're running 30 Terminators, but they don't normally throw their entire army into the midboard and say, "Come at me."
Yeah.
They dance around you, they score more points than you, and you go, "Oh, I've not fought anything for this entire game."
Every time you move close, units just disappear off the board. I'm sure they're cheating. Apparently, it's a stratagem. I don't read.
It might be in the rules, but I'm sure they're cheating.
Okay, so I had a couple more points for sort of play styles. That was Control Army, which feels more like a Magic the Gathering term. It is a thing though. And then the other one I was suggested was a Chaos Army. So for Control, I would say an army that maybe focuses on like anti-shooting. So the old lone op stratagem that CSM had and a few other factions, specifically in the gun line, is quite an anti-shooting army. You can engage at range and stop them shooting back. You control where they move to. You control where they shoot to.
Yeah.
An army with good Overwatch is a good control army because you
I think
control
a really
where they
good example of a
control where they
control army
move.
is your classic Wolf Jail. I think that
Okay.
can sort of like fall into one of two categories. Obviously, it's very aggressive in the sense that you want to get right in your opponent's face, but you're not looking to necessarily do damage. You're looking to just box them into their deployment zone and make it so that they can't score points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found similar with Green Tide, which really loves the new changes to Secret Mission. Still not sure it's an amazing build, but it's fun. I do love throwing just 160 orc bodies on the table and seeing what happens.
It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff. You can give a lot of it a 5-up shrug as well.
You could sort of argue, I guess, as well that melee Genestealer cults is a form of control army.
Fight on death absolutely is a form of control, and
when
melee
you're
Genestealers
taking 15 aberrants,
absolutely they pack it in. Yeah.
Yes.
Fights first.
You look at your Custodes opponent and you go, Lameo, Lamau even.
So the army I most associate with control, I would say, is old Custodes, 8th edition, 9th edition Custodes, early 10th edition, and Death Guard.
Yes.
Death Guard in particular, I would say, is probably the ultimate combat control army.
The fact that Death Guard still have such easy access to fights first.
On good units too.
On good units. Makes them a staple for control.
They have good Overwatch as well. They have good debuffs. They're one of the few armies in the games with a native debuff. No other army has access to you get worse when you get close, which is so strong.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have.
Particularly against like elite armies where you're paying for your toughness. To suddenly find you don't have it anymore can hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Chaos was one of them I was suggested. Do you guys have any examples of what you consider a Chaos army? I guess Chaos, I would maybe see like a multi-tool, an army that can go any which direction.
See, when you say the word Chaos, I immediately think of all of your like casino armies. Like high risk, high reward, but if it goes wrong quite quickly.
I was thinking of like Tyranids, of like all the Morlocks that pop out and do mortal wounds, and just like they all pop out, and there's just like a chance that you just do like 40 mortal wounds to your opponent's army, and just win that way.
The Vanguard Onslaught list where 3 Morlocks appear and they can uppy downy repeatedly. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good example, because that is an army that is ruled by dice, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah.
Deceptors loves going first.
Yep. If you go first, you have a very solid chance of winning. If you don't, you have an extremely solid chance of just dying immediately.
I guess World Eaters also, I would say, potentially fall into Chaos. Their army rule is dice rolls, basically.
Yeah.
They love going first. If they don't go first, it's a very different game for them. So you have to be quite adaptable as a player.
Yeah.
Soulforged Warpack, maybe?
That's an army that's ruled by dice rolls, because if you roll bad, it just dies.
Like that time my Vindicator killed itself after being overwatched by the Avatar of Cain.
Yeah, well, I think that almost goes for any CSM list.
Yes.
Not quite as chaosy, but I had a Forge Fiend kill itself, and in doing so, guaranteed I would lose the game, which is great. Felt really good.
Sounds like you should have rolled better, to be honest.
I should have rolled better. I should have rolled a 7 and not a 5.
That does sound like a skill issue.
A catastrophic issue, even.
So those are all like how we'd build lists, how we'd play our lists, and they change a lot. They change game to game. I personally don't think World Eaters want to massively aggro into Death Guard, because you stage, you get charged by Plague Marines who pick you up, and they've got fights first on the objectives, for example. So those are very adaptable. Obviously, everyone has preferences. I love small, crappy, tradey units.
Which means you must be good at using those, right?
No. There is a lot of skills that goes into using small tradey units a lot of the time. Funnily, my worst ever tournament result is using one of my favourite ever lists, which is Drakari MSU. And we'll get on to unit choices in a minute. And that was, the stabby characters, the Incubi. I had Harlequins allied in because it was 9th edition. So it was just tons of small boats, tons of guys doing
terrifying.
Back when Drazar would solo anything in the game.
Yep. Didn't he fight twice, like immediately?
natively. Yeah, he would fight twice. You got a chance to interrupt between his fights twice, but obviously the army packed a lot of fights last,
Yep.
so it was really quite difficult to interact with.
I remember I took Drakari to one event, and I ended up winning it in the end. But I was playing Orcs in the last round, and it'd gone really bad for me. He'd luckily popped a load of transports, and he charged 3 units into 3 units of my Incubi, and failed all of his leadership checks, which meant he was fighting last, and that single-handedly won me that game.
Easy.
So it just is a skill game.
Yeah, sometimes dice rule. So beyond playstyle, there's unit choices, and I would say they massively influence how the army plays. You can obviously build sort of a mid-range list, like we mentioned earlier, where you mix shooting and melee. It's very common for Space Marines. But like, as I mentioned a second ago, MSU, which is, depending who you ask, is multiple small units or minimum-sized units. That is very, very typical for Drakari. It's 5-man Incubi squads, Archons in each of them, a Witch squad with Lilith. It's 3 units of Scourges, because adding to them makes them no better. 3 units of Mandrakes, because, again, making them 10-mans doesn't score any better. Lots of these small 80, 90, 100 points units zipping around the board doing things. It's a lot of fun. It's how I quite enjoy playing. But it has problems. The damage of some of the units is great, but sometimes they just hit a wall and they cannot get over it. I think Demons is a really good example of the wall they hit, where they just die. On the flip side, something like Oaths a Moment is awful against them. You don't want Oaths 150 points of gene steal of chaff. It just feels bad. You'd kill it without it comfortably.
Yeah, Oaths at the moment has a massive problem into Horde armies, which I've found in my practice games. Marines really want to be fighting things that are more elite than them, weirdly.
Yeah.
Which there's lots of lists that pack elite units. What are some list builds, unit choices that you would say have their own characteristic, like MSU?
I mean, obviously you've got going back to Custodes. Custodes love to take 3 to 4 really disgustingly chunky bricks, and go. It's going to be a nightmare for you to get through one of these, and as soon as you've got through one, there's going to be another just to replace it. And
So,
obviously they can't do that for the entire game, but 1 or 2 good turns is usually enough.
yes, that would be more of a stat checky, tough build. I mean, not quite stat check. I mean, it's all the same stat line, but not necessarily a stat check, I would say.
Yeah, the skill in playing Custodes is putting your high stats where they can be flexed the most.
Yeah.
If you run in front of a Vindicator, you're going to quite quickly find that Custodes aren't as tough as you thought they were. But if you manage to wrangle it so that all you're being charged by is I don't know, some assault intercessors, you're going to go, I feel invincible.
Yeah, you lose one guy to the Power Fist, and then you kill them all back without blinking.
Yes, potentially with 1 or 2 Custodes as well.
Yeah. What about you, Connor? Any sort of builds, unit choice builds that you particularly think of?
I like the killy units, the unit where you just stack so many things on it that it can just rip a hole through your opponent's army. For me this
Hellbreak
weekend, so it was the Hellbreak Sword Brethren unit which I was using in Gladius. That does a lot of damage. So just units like that which trade and just hit super hard. They're the types of
Okay.
units I like to include.
I'm with you
So
there, actually. One of my favorite units, recently, is the Rage Fueled Warrior Captain for Blood Angels.
Yeah.
Running with, obviously, the Squad of Assault Intercessors for reroll wounds. And I think I did the maths, he has a damage cap somewhere in the 70s.
before his friends fight.
before his friends fight. Yeah.
That was pretty ludicrous. I fell in love with the Honor Vehement captain over the weekend. Him joining Sword Bros on his turn is 10 attacks at strength 10, AP 3, flat 3 damage, dev wounds, +1 to wound. And I'm just telling my opponents that, like, yeah, this unit pops out of that, and that's just one guy. And like, yeah, got to stay away from that.
Sword Brethren are like what I wish Chosen were. Like, I know Chosen are quite expensive
What's
already.
the
Yeah.
They
Sword
have
Brethren do
advanced
again?
charge,
They get like
plus
+1
one
damage, don't they?
damage, or plus one
+1
attack.
Yeah. So
Nice.
basically, any character you add just gets +1 damage on their weapon.
They,
So
they,
like
they
adding
basically go,
Hellbreak, you get a
I'm good into everything, pretty much.
yeah,
So that's so they're quite different lists there, because the Rage Fueled Warrior plus Intercessors is under 300 points. It's what, 100 for the character, 90 for the Intercessors.
90 for the character.
So 180, and if you want an Impulsor, it's now 280.
Yeah.
But Helbrecht, 10 Sword Brethren, and if you want to transport is
you'll need like a Redeemer or something.
300 or something points you're looking
Yeah.
at,
Which is a big investment.
Yeah,
which
I
is
did
that is
only take
the focal
5.
point of your list. Okay, I don't think you only need 5 to be honest. To be honest,
Yeah,
If you decide to run 10, though, you can just cause massive problems for people.
there is a world where you take Righteous Crusaders and you can take 10 with Grimaldus, and then you take 10 with Helbrecht and the Castellan with the 5 up, feel no pain.
So
And
without the
yeah.
Impulsor, the Ragefield Warrior captain with his Incest is 165 points. If you add in the Impulsor, it goes to 245.
Okay, yeah, so that's very little compared to, because the 5 Sword Brethren is 140, so 10 is 280. Helbrecht 400 points. It's a
Yeah.
Terminator brick,
Yeah.
and that now is the focal point of your list.
Whereas the captain is something you throw in and go, this will kill whatever I need it to quite comfortably, and it's
Yeah.
just a throwaway piece.
So the
Yeah.
captain is quite a trader unit.
Yeah.
Similar to how the Drakari play. It's a unit you throw away. If you can keep it for another turn, great. If not, it's hopefully done its job and taken out what needs to. The Hellbreak brick is I guess, a hammer, if you want to call it like that is your fronting up piece. It goes through the middle of the board or around the side of the board, and it kills everything it touches and
And whatever's
ruins your
left
opponent's plan.
struggles to kill it back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way I was using it over the weekend was just having a bunch of shooting which like whittled stuff down, and then turns 3 and 4 chucking out these sword bro bricks which delete something, and then if they don't kill it, it deletes another thing the next turn. And
Yeah.
you just keep pushing through basically.
That sounds suitably horrible. Black Templars still really good. Probably.
Who knew?
Yeah. Who knew?
So what about if I was to say stat check? What armies do you guys think of, Connor?
Necrons comes to mind. I think Wraiths were a stat check. I don't think you see them as because of points, but they were. But like Catans are a stat check, and they still half all damage, 5 up, feel no pain, bunch of wounds, high toughness, horrible things.
And you can just bring 4, 5, 6 of
Well,
them.
I think there was a list that ran 6 that came, I think, second or maybe even won like an event in the States over the past weekend. And I think the list was just like 6 Catans and chaff.
I hate that so much.
So that is like probably the most quintessential example of a stat check. That is everything important in that army is T11, 10 wounds, 4 up invuln, halving damage, 5 up feel no pain.
Yeah.
So you have all your bad guns can only shoot that, all your good guns can only shoot that, and none of them are enough to deal with it potentially. Some armies obviously just laugh at it and just go straight through it, but that's an example where you can throw these guys on objectives. They do just enough damage on their own or with a partner. They will clear out the objective, and that will build your score.
Yeah.
I think
15.
What are they called? Old AC/DC bricks.
Yeah, I mean, I ran that loads. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely
It's
miserable to play against.
a unit that regenerates, is not super tough in terms of toughness, but is 37 wounds or so that regenerates.
And
Um,
benefits from having a mixed wound
and
profile.
there's no gun that is good into them,
No.
because you shoot the good gun, they pick the bad units on there, otherwise, and vice versa. A las cannon kills a 1 wound guy, a bolter wounds a 3 wound guy. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Um,
In
they
index
obviously
index Necrons with the warrior bricks that you could double reanimate and put crypto frows in that had a 4-up feel no pain. I missed that unit. That unit was good fun.
I think I played against it once, and you and I just picked it up off the table, didn't we?
So we did a doubles. We played against the Lich Guard brick with the Crypto
Yeah.
Thralls.
Oh, the Lich guy, yeah.
Forge Fiend kills the Crypto Thralls. They reanimate. Forge Fiend again. Next Forge Fiend kills the Crypto Thralls. They don't reanimate. 5 Custodes, Wardens, and Captain or Blade Warrior just pick up the rest of the squad. So it took a bit of effort, but obviously Custodes with Forge Fiends is one of the best lists you've ever seen in your life.
Oh god, it's amazing. The only game we lost at that event was against Knights.
It was a Castellan who walked into the middle of the board in early ninth where you could see through walls. So you could see everything, you couldn't hide from it.
That was rough. But immediately after killing that Lich Guard brick, I think it was like 8 possessed killed a Tesseract Vault like that.
So, well, that's about 900 points, 800 points in Necrons gone in a turn. So the Necrons player was obviously sat around turns 3, 4, and 5 with no army left.
Doing sweet FA.
No. He had the Canoptic Reanimator.
He had a couple units.
He had a Reanimator that had nothing to reanimate.
So, obviously, that's a stat checky build. What about Horde, which is a type, I would say, a subcategory of stat check?
Yeah.
When I say Horde, what do you think of, Joe?
I mean, first thing that comes to mind is Tyranids. I can't remember the detachment name. It might
Endless
actually
Swarm.
be Endless. Yeah, Endless Swarm. There you go. You throw as many bodies out as possible, and you just keep regenerating them.
And I guess if we were to link that to playstyles we mentioned earlier, I would say it's not an aggressive army. It's not an army that does any damage, but it's very almost. I'd say it's quite proactive. It wants to stop you getting to objectives. It wants to get in your face. It wants to tag anything that has guns. Stop them shooting out of combat. Stop them getting good lines of sight. So I'd say it's quite a proactive army. But it has so many elements to it. It can also react. It's a very control army, I would say.
I think a lot of Nid's builds are very, very much hoardy. Like, you like to take a lot of gargoyles to just run them up the table to move block people, because they've got very cheap bricks of crap.
Yes,
there is a solid incentive for taking quite a lot of them.
I think if you're running a Tyranids list, even Crush a Stampede, and you're not taking 20 gargoyles, probably a mistake.
Another classic one's probably Green Tide.
Yeah, Green Tide, absolutely full stat check. It's it is just spamming T5 1 wound bodies. You can add a Feel No Pain in there as well. They're quite killy. They OC2, so they hold objectives well. They kill quite well. They fight well. They don't mind being shot a little bit because they have a surge move. It's very proactive. I would say it's not necessarily aggressive army, but it has a go turn.
That war turn hits like crack.
Yeah, and you can't war turn. You mean you can war turn too, but if you go second, suddenly it's not this hyper aggressive army. It's almost a control army. The war is not an offensive element; it's a defensive element.
Yeah, you pop your war and you make people go, "Oh, I don't want to go near that now."
Yeah, which gives you a chance to get to objectives, and if you have guns, you can still cut angles and take them out, or you can still line up charges because they've not moved back far enough because you have a surge move. But your army playstyle definitely changes with your unit choices, your army choice. So Green Tide is not always hyper aggressive, hyper control, hyper proactive army. It's often grabbing corners, grabbing objectives, and waiting, holding the war, which is quite difficult, really, because some armies are okay just sort of letting you charge them. It's not very fun. Which is why necessarily a full gun or full shooting skew is not great, or full melee skew is awful sometimes.
I'll tell you what though, as a Custodes player, it's really fun playing against a green tide army. Because the number of models you end up picking up off the table, it just feels amazing.
I'm not surprised.
Right, here's 25 attacks. Oh, look at all these explosions. I've got 30 hits. Oh, I've wounded with like 27 of them. That's a brick gone. And there's another one.
Yeah, I think the fun part about playing against Green Tide is asking your opponents how many of their models you've killed. So you can then tell your friends in your group chat, look guys, I killed 80 of them.
It's my green tide list, which is up there somewhere. Has a plane in it, and the plane's almost 200 points, and I still have 159 other models. So green tide is really fun to play against.
If I ever play against you while you're playing your green tide army, I'm putting you on the clock immediately.
You're going to spend all your time rolling dice. That's what's going to happen.
That is what I found when I played against, and when people played against my Crusader list, and I played on a clock. It wasn't me who was timing out; it's them, because they were having to roll so many dice shooting at me.
You should get one of those crap sticks for like just moving your army across the table.
Yeah, I mean, my friend who plays Admech, he runs a Skitari Hunter cohort, which are generally really high control army. The entire army is -1 to hit. There's lots of Vanguard who are -1 OC. He has low nop as a stratagem, the 18-inch low nop. So it wants to be on the board, getting around corners, getting all where it can to stop you scoring, to control your primary, especially. That's what it's quite good at. He, again, never clocks out. His opponents regularly run out of time. It's a lot of 10-man squads, lots and lots of them, with a 5-pin run. They don't die easily. So when you split fire, all that decision points take up your clock. So if you're playing on a clock, play fast against hordes, especially if they're lots and lots of units.
Really aggressively. When your opponent goes to the toilet, put the clock on them.
I guess one of the unit choices we not mentioned is maybe a glass cannon. I would say it's a common phrase. Drakari or glass cannon army. What do you think about that, Joe? The phrase glass cannon, not Drakari.
I think glass cannons are probably like the most fun types of armies you can play, because you throw stuff out, it kills something that's way higher in points value than itself, and then you don't care about it anymore because it's just died. I think a really good example is probably like Gene Stealers. They're not particularly special in terms of their stat line. Like toughness 4, 2 wounds, and usually sitting on a 5-up invuln. There's a lot of things in the game that will just eat through them, but in the right detachment, they can be really, really fast, and they can pick stuff up quite comfortably.
Yeah, so glass cannon generally, any unit that will trade upwards in more than just like one order of magnitude. It won't, a unit Incubi with an Archon, they don't just kill 150 points, they kill 200 points, 250 points. They earn their value and plenty back.
Yeah.
And fortunately for Drakari, they hop inside the transport again. Often, a lot of armies don't necessarily have that. I think the Rage Fueled Warrior Captain is probably a great example of a unit that is a glass cannon, because he's still only a Space Marine with 5 wounds and an invuln.
Yeah.
But if he is allowed to hit the right target, he will trade up 300-400 points. He probably goes through Canis Rex pretty well.
I think he one-taps Canis Rex probably.
That's 165 points, killing 450 points.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely an example of a glass cannon, I would say. What about you, Connor? Any thoughts on glass cannons? Any other unit choices, list builds you can think of?
I think glass cannons are good fun units, like Joe said. But they are usually trading pieces. Just use them to trade up. You know, you get your unit legionaries, you slap on a character, and it's 150, 160 points, and then they're going to go and delete this 300-point unit and call it a day.
I think
Yeah.
the closest thing custodians have to a glass cannon is probably the Vigilator party bus. So obviously, Rhino chock full of 10 Vigilators in a layer. So
They're
that's
the
like
sword ladies, right?
they're the sword ladies. So it's only 2 attacks each, but they're 5/2/2, and they have anti-psych of 5+ and dev wounds. So if they charge things like, I don't know, let's say you 10 Grey Knights Terminators, you're going to cause a massive problem for that player because they'll punch way above their value because they're going into the right target. They get a 3-up feel no pain on the clapback. So they'll survive the melee, but as soon as it comes to shooting, they're still only toughness 3, 1 wound, and a 3-up armor save. So literally anything in the game could sneeze at them and they'll just evaporate.
How many
So-
points is that unit?
So a squad of 10 Vigilators, let me find out for you.
So that's quite a specific unit. That's very teched for a matchup like Grey Knights, a matchup like Demons, a matchup like Accursed Cultists who have a Psyker in all the Accursed units.
But the
I don't
thing
know. There's
is,
not really a. I mean,
a
it's
layer,
tech.
a layer gives them fights first is the crucial thing. So
Okay.
if you really want to, you can sit them behind a wall and suddenly they're a heroic intervention threat as well. Because
So I guess in matchups where they're relevant, they're a proactive trader unit. In matchups where they're not relevant, they're a control unit with fights
yes,
first.
definitely.
Yeah, so I guess another example of units not always having a designated role, for example.
So a layer and 10 Vigilators is 200 points.
That's really cheap. Although it's only 20 power sword attacks, 20 mastercrafted power sword attacks.
20 mastercrafted power sword attacks, and then a layer does 4 attacks at 6/3/3.
6/3/3. Okay,
With anti-psych of 5+ dev wounds.
it's not bad.
Is there any way to get like any buffs at all on that?
So if you're playing Talons of the Emperor and you're near a Custodes unit, you get +1 to hit. So suddenly you're hitting on 2s. And you can get +1 to wound as well in the same detachment.
They don't get the crit 5s as shield host, do they?
They don't get the crit 5s shield host, no.
Okay.
They don't get Katars, they don't get anything exciting like that. It's just the stat line. Which
That's
I
a
think is a
shame.
bit criminal. They should get to do karate as well.
They should.
So we've talked about unit choices, about list builds, play styles, how your army, how you build your army, how your army shoots, fights, whatever. What do you guys think is your playstyle? What do you love? How have you come to the conclusion that's what you focus on, Joe?
So my army choices are, because I don't army hop. I'm a real fan. I'm a real Warhammer player. My army choices were dictated by what looked cool, but they sort of happen to have similar play styles. Custodes, you very much want to let your opponents string themselves out and make mistakes so that you can punish it. Blood Angels, you can do exactly the same thing with some really strong melee threats. You're just twice as fast and can advance and charge out like just for a CP. I like playing combat armies. They feel more tactical than shooting armies. Melee feels harder to pull off properly than shooting does, and therefore is more interesting. And I like to throw units at people and go, yes, that's going to be this many attacks, and watch them go, wait, what?
Yeah,
And
I think when that moment telling your opponent stats of like a character or a unit, and then it's like they do what? It's one of the best moments.
The classic when you fight your opponent asks you like what a custodian guard do. Like, right, so it's 5 attack space. Wait, what? At 7/2/2. Hang on a minute. And these ones reroll wounds. What?
oh no,
It's a
But there's
triple
only 2
whammy.
guys left. How did they kill my entire squad?
So have you given much thought to a shooting army? Have you ever played, let's say, Guard or Tau, the classic shooting armies?
Um, I occasionally think about Guard, but it comes from a more of like a trying to create a narratively fun army, which probably isn't what we're talking about right now. Um, the most shooty army I've ever played was Soulforge Warpack. I think that was double Predator Destructor, Forge Fiend, um, 2 Venom Crawlers, and a Vindicator. That was a lot of shooting.
And that's a gun line. That is,
That is a gun line. But I had 2 Mauler Fiends as well.
oh,
And
sure, okay.
the Venom Crawlers can do melee. And I had 3 squads of Legionaries. So I had credible melee threats, but like the core focus was shooting my opponent to bits. And this was the list that I picked up an entire squad of Hearth, the shooty, I say shooty, the shooty Votan unit, the one with the big guns.
The Brokir Thunderkin.
Thunderkin.
Those are the ones. I picked up a full squad of them with a Vindicator on Overwatch. And that was like, okay, I get why people play shooting armies now.
So the Overwatch threat is like a very credible part of a shooting army.
Yeah.
And I mean, even a mixed arms army loves a good Overwatch threat, especially if you're trying to control combat. You know, you don't want someone engaging you that doesn't have fights first, so you line up a really good Overwatch target facing that direction.
I mean, there's a reason Land Raider Redeemers are so popular.
Were so popular.
Well, yeah, were being the operative word.
What about you, Connor?
I've had a lot of different styles over the years, so and I've played a lot, so I don't think I've defined myself with one. I'd say the best has been when I've had like control and manipulation pieces. So one unit which I love and this is the Necron Warrior Blob. I think it was more in 9th edition. It was a bit more ludicrous, but like being able to like use that to score points I shouldn't have scored and get things I shouldn't have been able to do, and things like your opponent's not expecting. I think
Yeah.
stuff like that, being able to build those things into my list is quite sort of my style. But I think certainly more recently I've been trying to use stat checky stuff, which has not worked.
Because recently after LGT, I know you've changed a lot. You've been considering selling off a few armies. You've changed what you
Yeah,
want to play a little bit.
yeah. I'm trying to find a new, well, trying to lock down my style because I think it's changed, but I don't know what to yet.
Okay.
So
So
it's
What
more.
are you thinking?
I don't, so the thing I'm thinking is NIDS at the moment. Because it's got a couple of things I like, which is like a strong shooting base. So I think
Yeah.
Exocrines and Maliceptors, things like that. Like everyone knows they're pretty solid.
Tyrannofixes are
We're
fantastic.
trying to fix with rupture cannons, or even the flamer. I forget what it's called. Like that's really good.
Forget the flavor. The rupture cannon is what you want.
But the rupture
They are.
cannon,
Yeah,
D6
yeah.
plus 6 damage is like
It's
nice.
only 2 shots though. It's
So,
awful. I'm
That's
going to
why
go
you
out on
set
a
a
limb and say
hive
it's
turret next to
awful.
it, and you
no,
strap
that's why you run
DPV
three of
roll,
them.
or that.
So they are a Land Raider chassis with a blanking of a damage for less than 200 points.
Yeah,
With
that,
2 shots.
yeah.
A Predator Annihilator is 130 points on a Predator chassis with 3 shots and no
Nah,
blanking of a damage.
you're wrong.
Well,
I promise you now,
it's two
they're
shots.
really good.
Most of the time 3, sometimes 4.
I do own a Tyrannofex, to be fair, and it does have the rupture cannon.
It really is really good. I promise you, it's really good. 3 of them are really good.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your next army, Jack.
Well, it's not my next army because my next army is my orcs. So I guess for me, playstyle is very different to what I'm successful with. I love playing armies with small, crappy dudes, little
Just little
fellas,
guys being dudes.
little 60-point, 70-point fellas that zip around the board, scoring points. However, to play a control, a passive, a reactive, scoring army like that, your micromanagement, your macro management of your units has to be perfect, and mine is not. So recently, especially the last year or so, my best results have always been with armies with big hammer units. My back in May before 10th edition, my favorite list was the Creations of Bile MSU, with a couple brigands in support. I loved playing that, but it didn't work quite as I wanted, so I switched to Emperor's Children with the 10 Terminators. Those 10 Terminators were something else. They were the Black Rune of Damnation, if you remember them. They would absolutely murder anything they touched, and they would exist for the rest of the game. Doesn't matter what shot them. As long as you control the sight lines a little bit, they would exist for the entire game and control the middle of the board. So very much a control piece with lots of MSU around them, and they scored fantastically. They killed really well. They're really fun to play. They're my best results were Death Guard. Death Guard, not an MSU army. 2 units of 10 Plague Marines, all the juice, all the fights first. Very control, not very MSU at all. Not at all I like to play. Mortarion, 330 points. Big, chunky, stat checky piece who could just chew damage.
I remember
But different games is how it depends how he plays. So
whenever I played
often
against your Mortarion with Custodes, that was so painful.
they don't like -1 damage, those 9th edition Custodes. They really hated it.
He is borderline he was borderline unkillable.
Yeah, the closer you got was a Telemon, because they have a very similar stat line, and then
He
Mortarion has
still
more
killed
wounds.
Telemon.
Mortarion has more wounds, so he lived, and then kills the Telemon. Yeah. So yeah, my best shot in 9th edition was with a Death Guard list with Mortarion, and it's a very gunline control army. It sits behind its 2 units of Plague Marines. It covers angles, it covers corridors, which is very different to what I love playing. But the army's very effective, so I really quite enjoyed it because everyone loves winning. What about you? I mean, I've not asked you both, but any closing remarks? Anything you want to talk about in terms of play style?
I feel like playstyle is one of these things that it's quite easy to get comfortable and assume you're playing what you enjoy playing, and almost gaslight yourself into thinking that what you're playing is the army for you. I would quite heartily encourage people to step outside their comfort zone. Try a new army, try something that plays differently, because you might actually find out that what you're playing currently isn't what works best for you and isn't what you enjoy the most.
Totally agree. I think from a casual standpoint, I guess, a lot of players join with the army that catches their eye on the box.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what they stick. That's maybe what they stick to for 3 years, even. And actually, maybe they're not doing well. Maybe they are doing well, but maybe that's not what they enjoy, and you won't discover that until you try other armies. Whether you like the aesthetic or not, that's influences what you'll choose. But there are a lot of armies that blend all these play styles. I know we've mentioned it with Blood Angels. Blood Angels can play MSU. They previously anyway could play MSU, and it changes edition to edition. They can play a very proactive, aggressive army. They can play a control army with lots of fights first and sit back on objectives. They can play a tradie army. Or you could take Black Templars, again, Marines, a very aggressive army that wants to sit on objectives. Totally different style, though. It's not 5 mans, it's 20 mans. So it's always something to try out. Totally different play style, something to give a go to. And a lot of beginner advice is play the army you feel attached to visually, or the army you like the look of. Totally valid point.
But it might lock people into play styles they don't necessarily enjoy.
Absolutely. You might love how World Eaters look.
You might hate people standing half an inch outside of your engagement range.
If you want to play with guns, if you want to bring a tank, if you want to play with a Land Raider Redeemer, World Eaters are not the army for you.
I don't know. World Eaters Forge Fiend, My favourite unit in the game. I love all the fluff surrounding the World Eater's Forge Fiend.
Well-known piece, the World Eater's Forge Fiend did 0 damage to anything I've ever seen, except my own stuff, actually. Kills my vehicles really well.
Yes.
What about you, Connor? Any thoughts?
Don't think I've got anything else, to be honest.
Okay. Well, so thank you guys for watching. Please check us out on Discord, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, 6++. We have a league running in our Discord. If you want to test out some new builds, you don't need to buy these new models. You can play in our King of the Ping. Sign up ends in a few days. If you are not a player, more a painter, again, if you want to join our YouTube channel as a member, you can join our community painting challenge. I know for the month of October 2024, it's battle line units. Give us a go, join in. I'm sure you have a lot of fun. Last month, Tom painted a fantastic neophyte hybrid and came absolutely dead last. So check us out, like, subscribe, and we will catch you soon. Thank you very much.